Taiwan just put $1.5 billion behind robot nurses in real operating rooms. Welcome to medAI Times Podcast, your daily update on medical AI. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Right now, in a hospital in Taiwan, an artificial intelligence isn't just, sitting quietly on a glowing screen predicting patient outcomes. It's actually physically standing in an operating room.
Yeah.
Like it has robotic arms, and it's actively handing a surgeon a scalpel.
It's wild to even think about.
It really is. So today we are pulling apart the AI/ML Medical Daily Dispatch for June 1st, 2026. And our mission for you today is to really unpack exactly how clinical AI is making this massive leap from, theoretical software to actual embodied hardware, while simultaneously hitting some very hard regulatory and mathematical brick walls.
No.
So, to set the stage, here are the 8 headlines defining this shift right now. Number 1. Taiwan and Foxconn launch $1.5 billion clinical AI push. Number 2. Coalition for Health AI ships 8 governance playbooks. Number 3. BostonGene brings 9 AI biomarker abstracts to ASCO. Number 4. Roswell Park flags limits of AI clinical decision support. Number 5. Lancet Digital Health audits fairness metrics in clinical AI. Number 6, Dana-Farber lands 2 plenaries at ASCO 2026. Number 7, Anthropic splits programmatic Claude usage into credits. Number 8, NVIDIA unveils RTX Spark personal AI superchip.
Yeah, I mean, what we're witnessing right now is really the definitive end of the pilot phase.
Fine.
Right, finally. Because for years, AI in medicine has been this localized, highly contained experiment where you just feed data into a computer and get a text output.
Yeah, a glorified chatbot.
Exactly. But now it's becoming embodied at a sovereign national scale. And because this tech is moving into the physical world, the industry is suddenly being forced to answer the really hard questions. Like, we're moving past the hype and having to confront the mechanics of governance, the hard math behind algorithmic fairness, and just the raw economics of keeping these massive systems running across an entire health network.
Okay, let's unpack this, specifically that first headline, because it just completely redefines what a medical device even is. So Taiwan's hospital network, working directly with NVIDIA and Foxconn, just committed $1.5 billion to this initiative.
Right, the Healthy Taiwan program.
Yeah, the Healthy Taiwan Agentic and Physical AI program. They announced this at Computex Week in Taipei. And I want to start with that phrase, agentic and physical AI, because physical is obvious, right? They're putting actual robots into ORs and hospital wards. But agentic is a term that gets thrown around so much. What does that actually mean when you put it inside a hospital?
Well, it's a critical distinction. Because, historically, clinical AI has been very reactive. A doctor types a query into a prompt box, and the AI answers. That's a single action.
Right.
An agentic system actually has agency. You give it a high-level goal, and it breaks that goal down into dozens of smaller, independent tasks. And it executes them without waiting for a human to say, okay, at every single step.
Oh, wow. So it's managing itself.
Exactly. So Foxconn is introducing a system called CodaClaw, which is built on NVIDIA's NemoClaw architecture. And it acts as this multi-agent clinical orchestration platform. So imagine you're a clinician trying to coordinate a really complex patient case.
Like someone with multiple comorbidities.
Yeah. CodaClaw utilizes different specialized AI agents. So one is extracting text from the EHR, another is analyzing the raw waveform of an ECG, and maybe another is looking at breast cancer screening images. Instead of the doctor manually opening 3 different programs and running them, the CodaClaw platform is the conductor. These agents talk to each other in the background, synthesize all that disparate data, and then present one unified orchestration plan.
That's like the difference between playing a flight simulator on your laptop and actually flying a commercial jet with passengers.
Exactly.
And then there's the hardware attached to that brain. We are looking at the ScrubBot and the NeuroBot.
Right.
And the NeuroBot is actually already past the pilot phase at Taichung Veterans General Hospital. It's actively operating as a ward nursing robot, navigating physical clinical spaces. And ScrubBot is a voice-controlled surgical scrub nurse robot.
Which is just incredible.
It is, but it brings up a massive logistical issue. If I'm running a hospital, I know how to evaluate software. I run it through my clinical informatics team, see if it predicts sepsis accurately, and turn it on. But if I have a robot in a sterile operating room that uses computer vision to anticipate which instrument the surgeon needs next, the stakes are entirely different.
How does a system like that clear a national regulatory perimeter? Because these are continuously learning systems, right?
Yeah, and that is precisely why the entire global medical community is watching this Taiwan deployment so closely. This is the first sovereign, regulated, country-scale build-out of embodied surgical and ward AI inside an actual public health system.
Because historically, regulators hate continuous learning.
Oh, it's a regulatory nightmare. If you freeze a software model, test it, and prove it's safe, regulators are happy. But if ScrubBot learns a slightly more efficient, safer way to hand off a retractor on Tuesday based on, thousands of surgical hours it logged on Monday.
It's technically a different robot by Wednesday. Fundamentally a different system. So how do you regulate a machine that rewires its own behavior daily? Well, by partnering directly at the highest levels of the Taiwanese government, Foxconn and NVIDIA are essentially bypassing that traditional localized hospital approval process to create a new national standard. They're proving that you really need a sovereign sandbox to figure out the rules for physical medical AI.
Which is such a fascinating contrast to what we're seeing stateside. Taiwan is essentially building the airplane while actively flying it with passengers on board, whereas the U.S. is taking the complete opposite approach. Like, we are refusing to leave the tarmac until every single safety manual is written.
Yep.
And that brings us to the Coalition for Health AI, or CHAI. They just released 8 open-source governance playbooks, co-developed by over 150 conditions across more than 100 health systems.
And those playbooks are basically an attempt to create that exact safety manual you just mentioned. I mean, the scale of collaboration here is totally unprecedented. These modules cover the absolute granular mechanics of deploying AI safely, so lifecycle management, cybersecurity frameworks, third-party developer management, and crucially, continuous performance monitoring.
Which is desperately needed, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because a recent industry findings show that only 59% of healthcare organizations actually track the performance of their AI agents after they deploy them.
Wait, meaning 4 out of 10 hospitals are basically plugging a highly complex neural network into their patient data and just closing their eyes, assuming it'll work perfectly forever without any degradation.
Exactly. They treat AI like a traditional software update. Install it and forget it. But clinical AI models experience drift. As patient populations change or hospital coding practices evolve, the data feeding the model changes.
And the AI's accuracy degrades.
Right. So these CHAI playbooks provide the actual operational checklist to prevent that. And their real power lies in their connection to the Joint Commission, which is the body that accredits U.S. hospitals. The Joint Commission is launching an upcoming voluntary AI certification. If they map their certification directly to these CHAI playbooks, this instantly shifts from just being a helpful open source guide to the de facto regulatory template for the entire U.S. healthcare market.
Okay, let me push back on this whole concept of governance for a second, though, because I love a good playbook and I understand tracking model drift. But when you dig into these modules, they dedicate heavy focus to concepts like fairness.
Right.
Isn't that highly subjective? Like, if you ask a hospital administrator, a patient advocate, and a data scientist what a fair algorithm looks like, they will give you 3 entirely different definitions. How does a hospital actually quantitatively measure if an AI is being fair? It feels like we're trying to use a ruler to measure a philosophical concept.
Well, what's fascinating here is that you've hit on the exact mathematical crisis at the center of clinical AI right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it is incredibly subjective, and the math actually proves it. Today's Lancet Digital Health scoping review tackled this directly by auditing the fairness metrics used for clinical predictive AI. Because vendors constantly show up to hospital procurement meetings claiming, our AI is unbiased.
Sure, they all say that.
Right. But this review appraises the proliferating set of metrics used to test whether predictive AI discriminates against sensitive subgroups. And they conclude the field completely lacks a working, unified definition of fairness because the math forces a hard trade-off.
Walk me through that math. How do the metrics actually conflict?
So there are a few primary ways to measure fairness mathematically. You have demographic parity, which means you want the AI to predict a positive outcome at the exact same rate across all demographic groups.
Okay, makes sense.
Then you have equalized odds, which mandates that the true positive rate and the false positive rate must be identical across groups. Another is calibration within groups, where the predicted risk score perfectly matches the observed real-world risk in each distinct group.
Okay, and on the surface, those all sound like perfectly reasonable definitions of fairness.
They do.
Yeah.
But here is the brutal mathematical reality. If the underlying base rates of a disease differ across subgroups, which they almost always do in medicine, because diseases do not affect all demographics identically, These fairness metrics are mathematically incompatible. You literally cannot satisfy them all at the same time.
Wait, so if a disease naturally hits Group A harder than Group B, and I decide to govern my AI by forcing it to predict the disease equally across both groups to achieve demographic parity,
Yeah.
am I mathematically forcing the AI to invent false positives for Group B just to balance the spreadsheet?
That is exactly the mechanism. By optimizing for demographic parity, you mathematically guarantee that your algorithm will fail at equalized odds. You're actively degrading the clinical accuracy for one group, just to satisfy a specific definition of fairness for another. Picking one metric forces a mathematical trade-off on the others. And why this Lancet review matters so much clinically is that it strips away the marketing language. Procurement and review committees now have a citable framework to force vendors into a corner.
So they can demand to know, like, which specific metric did you pick?
Exactly. Which specific fairness metric did your engineers optimize for, and what mathematical trade-off did that choice force you to make? Vendors can no longer just wave their hands and say, our model is fair.
That is an incredible insight. You assume math is this objective, perfect truth, but here the mathematics are actively forcing clinical and moral trade-offs.
Yeah.
And this massive tension between theoretical fairness, governance playbooks, and raw clinical reality is playing out aggressively right now on the ground at ASCO 2026. For you listening, ASCO is the premier global oncology meeting, and this year they have practically turned their third day into AI Day.
Yeah, the signaling there is impossible to ignore. ASCO carved out a dedicated primetime AI block on Sunday from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Central.
Which is huge.
It is. It proves AI has graduated from being a niche subspecialty topic discussed in, like, side rooms. It's now a foundational horizontal track running across the entirety of oncology practice. We're seeing massive institutional validation of this. Dana-Farber has a tremendous presence with over 75 abstracts, and they landed 2 highly coveted plenary slots.
Meaning they're presenting practice-changing, trial-level evidence to the entire conference.
Exactly.
And looking at the specific abstracts, BostonGene is pushing really hard to move AI from an experimental tool into standard practice for clinical trial enrichment. They brought 9 AI biomarker abstracts to the conference. They're using their tumor portrait test and something called Cassandra cell deconvolution AI across multiple cancer indications. Like, for example, they're using it to evaluate TROP2 as an actionable biomarker in anal cancer. And for those outside the oncology bubble, TROP2 is a protein that is overexpressed in certain tumors, making it a prime target for specific drugs. But identifying it accurately and really understanding the entire tumor microenvironment is incredibly complex.
It is, and that is where the mechanism of cell deconvolution AI really shines. If you think of a traditional biopsy, a pathologist is looking at a slide of tissue that contains millions of different cells just tangled together. Immune cells, healthy tissue cells, cancer cells.
It's basically like looking at a complex biological smoothie.
A biological smoothie, that's a great way to put it. Cassandra AI mathematically unpacks that smoothie. It reads the complex molecular signals and separates them out, identifying exactly which ingredients are present and in what exact quantities.
Wow.
And by harmonizing these tumor microenvironment subtypes, BostonGene is using AI to better stratify patients. Because if you understand exactly what the tumor's neighborhood looks like, you can match that specific patient to the clinical trial most likely to save their life.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because amidst all this high-level genomic modeling, the conference is not just an unchecked AI hype fest. Roswell Park presented data that serves as a massive, necessary reality check. They actively flagged where large language model-based clinical decision support actually breaks down in daily oncology workflows.
And we desperately need that counter-narrative right now. Roswell Park's data highlights the profound danger of automation bias.
Yeah.
And this isn't just theoretical. A recent New England Journal of Medicine randomized controlled trial demonstrated the exact same mechanism. When a machine outputs a highly confident, perfectly formatted treatment recommendation, human clinicians naturally tend to defer to it.
Right, the cognitive load of their job is just so high that they get lazy.
They do, even when the machine is demonstrably wrong. So Roswell Park is arguing forcefully for hard-coded, mandatory human oversight. You cannot just unleash an LLM to generate oncology workflows without enforcing friction that forces the doctor to actually verify the logic.
And what I appreciate about Roswell Park's approach is that they are grounding this AI critique in very real, very complex clinical data. Like, alongside their AI limits abstracts, they're presenting hard data on the associations between GLP-1 drugs and aggressive breast cancer, as well as the safety profiles of CAR T cell therapy in older myeloma patients.
So this is vital.
Because CAR T involves extracting a patient's immune cells, reprogramming them to fight cancer, and putting them back in. It's an incredibly potent therapy, but it can trigger severe immune reactions, which is obviously especially dangerous in older patients. So by presenting these incredibly nuanced biological challenges alongside their AI abstracts, Roswell Park is basically reminding everyone that AI is just one single variable trying to navigate a tremendously complex biological system.
That is a perfect synthesis.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're using BostonGene's AI to deconvolve a tumor biopsy or an oncologist is evaluating a treatment plan against an LLM's recommendation, the AI requires immense contextual oversight.
Right. And it's not just a biological system it has to navigate, it's an economic one.
Oh, absolutely.
Because whether a health system is running BostonGene's predictive models in Massachusetts or Foxconn ScrubBot in Taiwan, there's an underlying engine making it all possible, which is the compute. And the economics and hardware of that compute just shifted dramatically under everyone's feet.
Yeah.
Let's look at the general AI side of the dispatch. Anthropic is fundamentally changing how they charge for programmatic Claude usage.
Yeah, starting June 15th, Anthropic is splitting programmatic usage. So that includes the agent SDK, Claude Code GitHub Actions, and third-party AI agents into a separate dollar-denominated credit pool.
Okay, and what are the tiers?
If you're on Pro, it's $20, Max 5X is $100, and Max 20X is $200. And crucially, these credits do not roll over from month to month. Yeah. And simultaneously, they are deprecating Claude Sonnet 4 and Opus 4 on that exact same day.
The deprecation alone is a nightmare. Like, if you are a hospital IT department and you spent the last 6 months validating a clinical workflow on Claude Sonnet 4, getting it past your security and compliance boards, Anthropic is now forcing you to migrate to a new model and revalidate everything by mid-month.
It's brutal.
But let's focus on the financial mechanism of that credit split, because this hits on exactly what we discussed earlier with agentic AI.
It does. Think back to the Code-Clause system. When you use a basic LLM wrapper, you ask one question, the model generates one answer, and you pay for a few input and output tokens.
Pretty straightforward.
But when you build an agentic system using an agent SDK, you give the AI a high-level goal. The agent loop is basically like an investigator in a library. Instead of just asking the librarian one question, the investigator is making 100 separate trips to the librarian, opening dozens of books, summarizing them, and synthesizing a final report. Every single one of those micro steps consumes tokens.
And under Anthropic's new pricing, you are paying for every single trip to the librarian from a capped credit pool. Industry analyses are pegging the effective price increase at anywhere from 12 times to 175 times higher for heavy SDK users.
Staggering.
175 times. If you're a health system that's just trying to run a pilot program using clinical LLM agent loops to parse patient records, how do you even afford those kinds of cloud economics? It feels like this pricing model instantly bankrupts the exact innovation we were just praising at ASCO.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it certainly creates a massive financial bottleneck for any healthcare system dependent on cloud AI APIs. But this is exactly where NVIDIA's announcement back at Computex provides the perfect strategic escape hatch.
Oh, right.
Jensen Huang unveiled the RTX Spark personal AI superchip, alongside new DGX station desk-side supercomputers powered by the GP300 Grace Blackwell Ultra architecture.
Okay, I have to push back on this vision for a second. Desk-side supercomputers. Let's be real about hospital infrastructure. Underfunded hospital IT departments struggle to keep the guest Wi-Fi running and their Windows machines updated. Are we seriously expecting them to procure, install, and maintain liquid-cooled AI supercomputers sitting physically next to a doctor's desk?
Well, if you look at it as a DIY server rack, no. But NVIDIA is positioning this as an appliance model. It's a direct challenge to Apple, Intel, and Qualcomm on the desktop workstation. You plug it in, and it runs.
Okay, so it's a closed box.
Exactly. And for healthcare, this hardware shift is profound because it solves two massive problems simultaneously. First, if cloud AI gets too expensive due to per-token SDK pricing, running the models locally eliminates those recurring API fees.
That makes sense.
Second, and honestly more importantly, is data residency. Many hospital compliance rules strictly forbid sending sensitive protected health information out to a third-party cloud provider. Having massive, Local inference horsepower sitting on a desk safely inside the hospital's firewall fundamentally changes the math. You decentralize the compute power back to the actual clinic.
So what does this all mean? We started by talking about the mental image of AI as just a glowing rectangle, and our mission was to see what happens when it steps out from behind the glass.
It means the clinical AI industry is in the middle of a massive, painful maturation phase. We've watched the technology move from a theoretical chatbot to a $1.5 billion multi-agent robotic deployment in Taiwan.
Right.
We're seeing it governed by new, highly rigorous frameworks in the U.S. that force us to mathematically confront the reality of algorithmic trade-offs. It's being actively deployed in oncology to deconvolve the very nature of cancer cells, while simultaneously the entire hardware and cloud cost ecosystem powering it is being completely rewritten to favor local, secure, desk-side compute over expensive cloud APIs.
It is an entirely new, incredibly complex landscape, and that brings us right back to those physical robots we started with. Look closely at the regulatory pathway Taiwan is carving out for Foxconn's adaptive surgical AI stack, the Claude and the ScrubBot. They are building the plane while flying it, embracing the continuous learning loop at a national level. The open question for you to explore on your own is whether the US FDA could plausibly follow a similar route to regulate autonomous, continuously learning robots, or if the US, trapped on the tarmac writing safety manuals, is destined to fall permanently behind in the world of physical, embodied medical AI.
Thanks for listening. Find us on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. See you tomorrow.